Subscribe because it's free.
The Galactic Union prided itself on its mastery of exploration. Over 1,000 species have been cataloged, each residing on habitable worlds ranked between Class 1 and Class 7. Any world beyond Class 7 was deemed inhospitable, too dangerous for life to develop, let alone flourish. Yet, the latest report from the Deep Space Probe defied all logic. The data was impossible, an error in the system. A planet, classified as a Class 13 Deathworld, showed unmistakable signs of intelligent life. Dr. Volterkesh, senior xenobiologist, dismissed it immediately. No sapient species could originate from a world so hostile. Extreme gravity, shifting tectonic plates, an atmosphere filled with deadly particulates, oceans teeming with hypercarnivorous predators, an ecosystem constantly battling itself for survival. The probability of intelligent life surviving such conditions was zero. And yet, the signals from the third planet in the uncharted Sol system were undeniable. Complex electromagnetic waves flooded the void, radio signals, digital transmissions, structured patterns. Not random noise. Communication. The Council wasted no time dispatching the Levac 7, a diplomatic research vessel equipped with the most advanced scanning technology in the galaxy. The mission: investigate the anomaly and determine the threat level. As the vessel approached the Sol system, it was immediately bombarded with electromagnetic interference. Strange pulses, ancient echoes of signals bouncing between satellites, bursts of incomprehensible language. Volterkesh narrowed his eyes at the data. The sheer volume of information was staggering. Even the most advanced civilizations in the Union didn't generate this much electronic noise. The third planet loomed into view, a turbulent sphere of blue and green, marred by massive swirling storms and raging wildfires. From this distance, it looked like a world still in its violent primordial state, a place where life struggled to gain a foothold. But a closer scan revealed something far more disturbing. Massive artificial constructs dotted the surface. Cities, some reaching the edges of the atmosphere, others buried deep underground. And orbital stations, primitive but undeniably functional, drifted in the void. They were not just surviving, they were thriving. A pit formed in Volterkesh's stomach. He turned to his assistant, Kira Laj, who was frantically analyzing the probe data. She looked up, her voice uneasy. They'd developed spaceflight. Silence fell over control deck. The implications were clear. If a species from a Class 13 Deathworld had already reached space, then their resilience, adaptability, and intelligence surpassed anything the Union had ever encountered. This must be a mistake, Volterkesh muttered. Run the atmospheric viability test. There's no way a sentient species evolved in this environment. The results came back within minutes. The air was thick with oxygen, far more than most species could tolerate. The presence of nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and an alarming level of microscopic biological hazards made it clear this world was lethal. No Galactic Union species would last more than a few hours exposed to the surface. And yet, the dominant species roamed freely. The probe data continued to pour in, feeding the ship's mainframe with images and footage. Volterkesh watched in growing horror as he saw the inhabitants of this world. They were bipedal, carbon-based, relatively small compared to most advanced species. But everything about them was wrong. Their movements were unervingly fast. Their eyes, predator eyes, swept their environment with calculated awareness. Unlike most sapient species, which relied on cooperation and defense mechanisms, these creatures radiated aggression, curiosity, and confidence. The probe focused on a bustling cityscape where thousands, no millions, of these beings move about their daily lives. Some operated machines that roared across the landscape at unnatural speeds. Others constructed massive structures from raw materials pulled from the very crust of their planet. The sheer scale of their industry was unlike anything the Union had ever documented. Then, without warning, the probe's feed cut to static. Volterkesh's breath caught in his throat. What happened? Kirilash's fingers darted over the control panel, desperately trying to re-establish the link. They shot it down. The control deck fell silent. Volterkesh's heart pounded in his chest. Did they detect it? Yes. Kirilash swallowed. And they destroyed it. The weight of that realization settled over the crew like a suffocating cloud. No species in the Union had the technology to detect a cloaked probe, much less the capability or the sheer instinct to eliminate it without hesitation. This was not a primitive, oblivious species awaiting discovery. They knew, they saw, and they acted. Valterkesh turned back to the viewport, his gaze locked on the planet below. His mind raced through the possibilities, the ramifications. A Class 13 Deathworld had birthed a species that wasn't merely surviving, but dominating. Something was very, very wrong. Valterkesh stood frozen, staring at the static feed where the probe's transmission had once displayed the impossible. The silence on the control deck was suffocating. The humans had detected their surveillance and reacted immediately. No analysis, no hesitation, just action. Kirillach finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. They knew it wasn't theirs, and they destroyed it. Valterkesh turned to the analysis console, bring up their biological data. The probe had managed to skin several life forms before its destruction, but the dominant species was an outlier in every conceivable way. Their skeletal structure was dense, far denser than any sapient species recorded. Their musculature was layered with fast-twitch fibers optimized for endurance and explosive movement. Their circulatory system was redundant, their immune response aggressive, and their regenerative abilities unsettling. Survival on a death world explained some of this, Valterkesh admitted, forcing himself to think rationally. But these adaptations are extreme. Kirillach scrolled through the medical reports. Sir, they heal rapidly. Their bone structure suggests frequent fractures and repairs. Their bodies adapt to damage. A holoscreen flickered, displaying a historical breakdown of human physiology. The footage was disturbing. Humans engaged in vicious physical altercations with each other. Testing, training, pushing their limits beyond what should be biologically possible. In one clip, a human continued moving even after sustaining catastrophic injury. Valterkesh exhaled slowly. How do they survive so much trauma? Kirillach hesitated. Pain tolerance is abnormally high. Their bodies override it in moments of crisis. And they don't rely on natural weaponry. No claws, no venom, no reinforced plating. Instead, they create weapons. They don't need fangs when they can fashion tools that surpass nature's design. The implications were unsettling. Most species in the Union evolved defensive adaptations. They avoided risk. Predators among the Union were rare, and even those relied on calculated strikes rather than sustained conflict. Humans? They didn't avoid danger. They confronted it. They endured it. And they won. Valterkesh gestured toward the planetary surface. They've built civilizations in every possible biome. Deserts, frozen wastelands, high radiation zones. Places where even our most advanced suits wouldn't keep us alive for long. Kirillach clenched her mandibles. They shouldn't exist. The console beeped. More data fed through the analysis system, compiling a timeline of their evolution. The deeper they looked, the worse it became. Humanity's planet had tried to wipe them out multiple times. Ice ages, supervolcano eruptions, global droughts, mass extinction events that should have reset evolution. But every time humanity persisted, not only had they survived the catastrophic cycles of their planet, they had conquered them. Where other species might have perished, humans engineered solutions. They learned to bend nature to their will. This can't be right. Valterkesh's voice was barely above a whisper. Their planet wasn't kind to them. It was an enemy, and they didn't just endure it. They won. Another report appeared, detailing human endurance. Unlike most creatures who relied on short bursts of speed or strength, humans simply kept going. A video played. A human hunting an animal not through ambush, not through speed, but through sheer persistence. The creature ran. The human followed. The creature collapsed. The human did not. Kirillach turned away, disgusted. They don't stop. Valterkesh felt something he hadn't in centuries. Fear. The Union's greatest hunters specialize in striking swiftly, overwhelming prey in seconds. But what do you do against something that refuses to die? Then, the worst revelation of all appeared. The humans were not alone on their planet. Most sapient species in the Union evolved after their dominant predators had gone extinct, allowing their civilizations to flourish. But Earth had never been tamed. Humans had evolved surrounded by monsters, apex predators, nightmarish megafauna, creatures that should have crushed them in their infancy. But the humans didn't just survive alongside them. They drove them to extinction. They outcompete their own predators, Kirillaj whispered in horror. They didn't wait for nature to remove threats. They removed them. Valterkesh's mind raced. If humans had done this to their own planet, what would they do to others? The final scan report loaded. It detailed not just their physicality, but their psychology. And that was the most terrifying part of all. Sir! Kirillaj's voice trembled. They fight each other. Constantly. The Union had long evolved past war. Conflicts were rare, fought in controlled environments or resolved diplomatically. But humans? They had fought non-stop since their species first emerged. The screen showed millennia of warfare, tribes battling for resources, empires rising and falling in oceans of blood, weapons growing more advanced, more destructive. They didn't just fight to survive. They fought because it was in their nature. And even when peace was achieved, they simulated war for sport. Kirillaj gripped the console. They built entire industries around combat. They enjoy it. Valterkesh clenched his jaw. We are looking at the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Another alert flashed. A live drone feed showed human soldiers in combat training, running towards gunfire, not away from it. Even when outnumbered, wounded, or outgunned, they fought with unwavering drive. One soldier was struck by a projectile. He staggered, recovered, and kept advancing. There was no fear in their movements, no hesitation, only the will to win. For the first time, Valterkesh considered the terrifying possibility. Maybe humans weren't just another sapient species. Maybe humans were something else entirely. Something evolution wasn't supposed to create. Valterkesh paced the command deck, his mind racing. The evidence was undeniable. This was not just another species. Humanity was an anomaly, a mistake of evolution, a force that shouldn't exist. And yet they did. They're too aggressive, Kirillaj muttered. Too reckless. Their history is nothing but conflict. Valterkesh turned sharply. And yet they survived. The data suggested that war was not a flaw of their species. It was a refinement process. Every conflict forced innovation. Every hardship produced a more resilient generation. Every setback made them stronger. The implications were terrifying. They've already achieved space travel, Valterkesh said. How long before they develop faster-than-light capabilities? Kirillaj's mandibles clicked in agitation. We cannot let that happen. Valterkesh's gaze hardened. It may already be too late. A new transmission flashed on the screen. Not from their probe, not from their surveillance network. From the humans. A message, simple and clear. We know you're there. Every officer in the room tensed. The message continued. You have observed us. We have observed you. Kirillaj exhaled sharply. They detected us? Valterkesh's stomach twisted. More than that, they're addressing us directly. The screen flickered, and suddenly an image appeared. A human, a male, wearing a uniform, standing in a dimly lit room. His eyes were sharp, focused, not afraid, not confused, but assessing. He spoke. His words were translated instantly. We are humanity. We know you are watching. We know you see what we are. Kirillaj leaned in, her claws tightening around the console. They shouldn't be able to do this. Valterkesh said nothing. He was too focused on a human's face. There was no fear in his expression, only curiosity, and something far worse, confidence. The human continued. You think we are dangerous. You are correct. Kirillaj inhaled sharply. They know. The human's gaze never wavered. You wonder if we are a threat. The answer is simple. He leaned forward, his voice calm, measured. Not yet. Silence filled the control deck. Not yet. The meaning was clear. They were coming. Valterkesh's blood ran cold. The Union had always assumed first contact would be made on their terms, that they would be the ones reaching out, guiding primitive species into the galactic fold. But humanity? Humanity wasn't waiting. They had detected an unknown presence in their skies, traced it, analyzed it, and responded, not with fear, not with panic, but with a warning. Kirillach whispered what they were all thinking. They're studying us. The human's expression didn't change. Do not interfere. The message ended. The screen went dark. No threats. No hostility. Just a statement of fact. Voltakesh exhaled slowly. They are aware of us, and they are patient. Kirillach's claws dug into the console. What do we do? Voltakesh turned toward the viewport, staring down at the blue and green world below. A world that forged warriors, survivors, conquerors. He understood the message now. The humans were not declaring war. They were not seeking allies. They were warning the Union not to interfere, not to intervene, because if they did, humanity wouldn't run. Humanity would fight. And the terrifying truth was, they might win. The control deck was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The message from the humans lingered in the air, heavier than any weapon the Union had ever encountered. Do not interfere. Kirillach finally broke the silence. They just warned us. Voltakesh's hands trembled as he studied the darkened screen. It wasn't a bluff. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't even a negotiation. It was a fact. They knew we were watching, knew we were evaluating them. And instead of fear, instead of submission, they responded with calm certainty. Kirillach's mandibles twitched. What do we do? Voltakesh inhaled deeply. We leave. Kirillach's eyes widened. We leave, he repeated, firmer this time. We erase all records of this world. We remove it from our star maps. We pretend we never saw it. It felt wrong. The Union had encountered warlike species before, barbaric empires, unstable civilizations, species that burned bright and collapsed under their own violence. But this was different. Humanity wasn't burning itself out. It was sharpening itself, refining its weapons, perfecting its tactics, expanding its reach. And most importantly, they were patient. Kirillach swallowed hard. If they reach the stars, they will reach the stars, Voltakesh interrupted. The question is, will they come as allies or conquerors? That was the problem. There was no certainty, no precedent for a species like this. They weren't driven by hunger or desperation. They didn't expand because they had to. They expanded because they could. They explored because they wanted to. And the galaxy had never seen anything like them. Kirillach hesitated. Shouldn't we warn the Union? Voltakesh turned sharply. Warn them of what? That there's a species unlike any other? That we watch them and they watched us back? He shook his head. No, if we bring this to the Council, they will send envoys, fleets, scientists. Kirillach nodded slowly. And the humans will see it as interference. Voltakesh closed his eyes. Yes, the outcome was clear. If the Union tried to control humanity, to guide them as they had with other species, it would be seen as a challenge. And humans didn't ignore challenges. They conquered them. Voltakesh turned toward the crew. We are leaving. We will never return. Kirillach hesitated for only a moment before nodding. The command deck came alive with activity. Coordinates were set, drives warmed up, systems aligned for a jump. The last thing Voltakesh saw before the viewport dimmed was Earth, a world that had forged warriors out of necessity, a world where life was a battle, and the strong did not survive, they thrived. As the ship lurched into faster-than-light travel, Voltakesh released a slow breath. For the first time in his long career, he was not certain the Union's future, because out there on a Class 13 Deathworld was a species that did not bow, a species that did not break, a species that would one day come to stars. And when they did, the galaxy would never be the same.